Well, I'm glad all of you are here tonight. I'm just going to look at one concept at the end of Hebrews chapter 10. And for those of you who are visiting, we don't spend very long in our text on Wednesday nights. I will tell you that Sunday morning, I'm going to deal with what I consider to be maybe the most difficult section of Scripture in all the New Testament. You probably think it's an easy, simple text out of Romans chapter 13. You probably always say that we're just going to obey the laws of the land. And I'm going to tell you before we get through with that text, which probably will take us multiple weeks, you're going to find that it may be the most challenging, most difficult text for those of us who are Christians that's ever been. Rob had me listen to a sermon by a great preacher named John MacArthur. It took me an hour to get through his lesson. He had an amazing take. I listened to another one speak on it. Took me 50 minutes to get through his. They're on polar opposites. But both of them are right. Both of them are right. Interesting. That's why it's going to take so much. So I'm interested in looking into this. Just going to warn you, it's difficult. And there are many texts in the Bible that we have glossed over, misused, mishandled, and we've led people down pathways with these texts that we probably should not have done. Here's one of them at the end of Hebrews chapter 10. Now, before I get into it, I want to ask you, why do we meet like this? Why do we come together like this? Especially why would we come together on a Wednesday night like this?
Strength.
All right, for strength? To spur each other on? Is it a commandment? To encourage, which kind of goes to spur one another on. And what during the pandemic, everybody remember the pandemic? As we were trying to come back together, churches everywhere were trying to figure out how to get back together and what to do. And I still hear to this very day so many churches. One of them here in town, the preacher talked to me just saw him and passing by about how many people they lost that are now watching online. And so I spent a Sunday afternoon a year ago with a giant church in Oklahoma City, and they were talking about, as they come back together, how to do church, because everything's kind of changed up. And I said, well, it might be a big mistake to rush back into doing just what you had been doing without first asking the question, why? Why do you do what you do? What is the purpose? And I explained to them the value of relational energy. And I've told you before that it's so easy to get fatigued in this life, and fatigue leads us to a mental fog. Everybody know what a mental fog is? Your mind just keeps spinning and spinning, and you can't get an answer. And you can't go to sleep tonight because you can't figure it out. And you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and your mind goes right back to the problem. You can't figure it out. And you stay in that fog long enough, you get desperate enough, you begin to flirt with things you'd normally never think about flirting with. We saw it when we studied in the life of David. Remember that? This man of great, great character, a man after God's own heart, makes giant mistakes because he is so fatigued in that fog. You see it in the life of Elijah, the guy who's so stout and so strong in the Old Testament. He spends all this time confronting Ahab and dealing with Ahab, and then all of a sudden Jezebel will say, Ahab's wife Jezebel will say, by this time tomorrow you're going to be like one of my prophets, you'll be dead. And he runs and is under a tree, and he's saying to God, well, I'm no good. Let me die. I'm like all the others who can't make a difference in this world. And you think, how does this guy who's been so strong end up like that? Well, he gets fatigued. And there are 3 ways we get fatigued. One reservoir of energy is, do you remember that? Physical. We understand how that happens. One is spiritual. We understand how that happens. One is emotional. And we understand how emotional fatigue happens when you have stress relationships and you have fear and you have money problems and And our world right now, our world everywhere is fatigued in many ways, but most certainly they're fatigued emotionally. People are worn out emotionally right now, and they have unusual anxiety right now, and they have unusual problems that come with anxiety right now. And there are more people suicidal at this moment at young ages than it's ever been that they can figure out in the history of our country. And how do you get over emotional fatigue? And you may remember my story, and I didn't even intend to go this place, but remember after a lot of years of running a university, I was worn out. I was worn completely out. And I told our trustees, after being in the presidency for 16 years, I got to get out. I'm going to mess up everything I've done for good in the last year if you don't get me out of here. And they said, you got to stay a little longer. You got to stay 3 more years. You got to go to your 19-year part. So I started trying to figure out how to do that. So I enrolled in this thing in Dallas, where I went to Dallas the first Wednesday of every month and sat at the feet of a clinical psychologist who lives in California now. He and his partner, Henry Cloud, the partner, opened mental health clinics in Dallas. You may have heard of the Mineth Meyer clinics. They opened them. They sold them. Went to San Diego, built new ones, sold them. Now they've been writing books for 20 years, and they do executive coaching. And Cloud sends an email and says, join my group. Have a phone interview. Phone interview just to see if you got enough money to pay for it. It was pretty expensive. So 6 of us show up. 6 of us show up in this little tiny group. And I think I'm going to learn leadership things, and all Cloud wants to talk about or Townsend wants to talk about is mental health. So I'm in this circle with these guys, and the guy to the right to me is crying, the guy to the left of me is crying. I'm saying, I don't like this, I don't want to be a part of it. But 3 months into it, Townsend called me on a Saturday morning and made me really nervous. Why is a fellow named John Townsend calling me on a Saturday morning? And he said, Jones, I got you figured out. And I know I had a nervous voice. I said, what do you mean you got me figured out? He said, you're about a CEO as I've ever known anywhere. And you got to understand, I'm a minnow in his great big pond. He deals with people a lot larger than I. And he said, you're killing yourself. You give and you give and you run and you run and you're dying on the inside. And I said, well, John, that's exactly why I'm in this program of yours. I'm wearing out. And he said, I've got another prediction for you. I don't know your wife, but he said, my guess is if I'm right about the first part, you're killing your wife. He said, because the only person you'll ever talk to is your wife. And so you come home every evening and you start unloading on her all the problems with all these faculty members and all the financial problems and all the other things. And I said, man, John, you're exactly right. She's really fragile. And I remember saying to him, I think there are times that she'd rather me not come home than to come home like this. And he said, Jones, I'm going to fix you. And I said, well, John, how would you fix somebody like me? He said, I'm going to fix you. He said, you're not going to like it, but I'm going to fix you. He said, I want you to find 2 people. He said, I would tell you 4, but you couldn't handle it. Those are his very words. I'd tell you 4, but you couldn't handle it. I want you to find 2 people whom you trust. They're safe people. And I want you to go to those safe people and tell them that you want to meet with them every 3 weeks separately. Their job is not to give you advice. Their job is not to talk. Their job is to listen. And you tell them everything. You tell them all the mistakes you made. You tell them what made you angry. You tell them the problems you've got. You tell them how the faculty are disgusting or whatever you want to tell them. He said, what you've missed your entire career and your entire life is the term relational energy. And he said the only way you fill up that emotional tank that you've been talking about, he had heard me teach this principle. I've taught this principle to corporations everywhere that have been willing to listen to me. He said the only way to fill up the emotional tank, the emotional energy reservoir, is through relational energy. And you get that by talking to people in a vulnerable way. Safe people, only safe people. And in our churches, God put us together or invited us to come together for a reason. And we've even gone beyond what God said. I mean, he didn't tell us to come together on Wednesday night, and he certainly didn't tell us to eat together. But I'm going to tell you something. Eating together is the most fun part of what we do on this night. And it's probably the most valuable because you talk to each other and you joke with each other. And so I'm sitting with Greg McKee, and you know what he had the audacity to say to me? He said, we got a good crowd tonight. I wonder if we got a guest speaker. You know? And we laugh like that, and we talk like that. And we are doing something called relational energy. We're building each other up. I went by Pat a while ago and said, if this guy sitting next to you is bothering you, you let me know. I'll take care of him. I'm a lot tougher than I look. You know, he may be big, but that's no big deal. You know, and Pat said, I think you can just run faster. So what are we doing? It's called relational energy. We're able to joke, we're able to talk, and we're able to get away from all this world's mess and all the problems and all the difficulties, and we're building each other up. And so here's this text that I think has been so abused. And he says, if I can find it, I'm trying to find verse 25. Let us hold unswervingly, it's chapter 10, verse 23, to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Now, you've got to remember, why is the book of Hebrews written in the first place? What's happening that this writer, whoever it is, would write this book? Anybody remember?
They're going back.
They're giving up. And they're going back. And when we give up and we say we're through with all this, we always go back to the way we were. Everybody remember that? We always go back to the way we were. We go back to what was comfortable, what we've always known. They're trying to go back. And he's saying, all these chapters, he said, don't you understand if you go back what you're giving up? Jesus is the best thing that ever happened to you. So what we need to do is consider one another, and we need to hold on to this hope that we have. We need to spur, that's Greg's word, we need to spur one another on to love and good works. So let us not give up meeting together as some have begun to do. Now, don't abuse that passage. I remember Susan and I stopped at a little tiny congregation, I'm going to tell you where, driving back from Cordell, headed toward Lubbock, Texas, and got up, stopped in there, and a guy got up, and he was a fill-in guy, and he used this text, and he was beating everyone in that room to death about why they weren't back on Sunday nights. And I thought, oh my, where are you getting this? How can you talk like this? It's not what this is about. He's saying, don't you understand how important it is for you to come together? And I know that some people don't like to come together on Wednesday nights. That's what I told you a few weeks ago on a Sunday morning. I said, I really like it. Every time our elders announce about Wednesday nights, they kind of phrase it like this. We're going to have this kind of supper, and we're going to have a brief little tiny devotional. And if that's something you like to do, then come. The implication is what?
You don't have to.
If you don't like it, if it doesn't fit you, then you don't have to do it. But if you do come, let's have it so that it's an environment where we spur one another on to love and good works. And if we're doing that, he says, then don't quit this meeting together. Now I'm relatively certain that in that day they could barely find time to meet once on what we call the Lord's Day or Sunday. And I don't know if that's early in the morning. There's some actually speculate it was late at night because they worked all day. I don't know what it is. But he's saying, this is your chance to get together and to smile at each other and to poke fun at each other and to encourage each other and to remind each other that this gift that we've been given through Jesus Christ is the right way to live. And it's a blessed way to live. And it's a powerful way to live. And it has fruit upon top of fruit upon top of fruit that we call contributions to abundant living. And so I don't want you to misuse this passage. We will spur one another on to love and good works. And let us not give up meeting together as some have begun to do, in the habit of doing. But let us encourage one another. Let us encourage one another. And all the more as we see that great day when Jesus comes again approaching. Let us encourage one another. Why would I need to encourage each other? Why would I need to do that? Because life is so very difficult for almost every one of us. Well, it is difficult for every one of us. It just comes in seasons. All of you recognize that? I mean, I was so tired before I got here tonight. Literally all the way I drove back from Edmond today, I was on the phone dealing with issues. And not just when I was driving back, I stood in my driveway and talked for another 30 or 40 minutes. But now I feel pretty good. Now I feel like I have some energy. Because I sat by that, I wish I had that long hair like that. Like mine all got chopped off. It'll be back. It'll be back. But I sat by Greg, and he's wishing for a new speaker. And I'm thinking, I'm having fun with that, you know. And so but I feel energized. How did I get that? How did that come? How did I get that? It's because we all kind of joked together and we talked together, and I got filled up with some relational energy. And that's for your good. Let me tell you something. God didn't command it for his good. That's how people get always confused. You know, when he talked about the Sabbath day, he was talking to the Jews. You do all these things on the Sabbath day, and you think you've got to get just right and do this. Jesus said one day, wait a minute. Do you understand why you have the Sabbath day? Do you think that's for God? You think God did it, made you do that for him? He did that for you. He knew you needed a day of rest. Don't get it backwards. But we are notorious for getting things backwards in our effort to get things right. We make things hard that were really, really supposed to be simple. And our gathering is really, really simple. It's to encourage, spur each other on.